The morning of the 23rd of July, 2000, dawned with a deceptive tranquility over the Indian River in Merritt Island, Florida. Yet, that peace was brutally shattered by a retired judge's grim discovery. A pervasive, putrid odor, initially mistaken for a decaying animal, led him to the water's edge, where he encountered a sight that would forever be etched in his memory. The bound and brutally murdered body of 22-year-old Misty Morse. Her corpse, meticulously wrapped in rope and duct tape, had been unceremoniously dumped into the tranquil waters, a chilling testament to a killer's desperate attempt to obliterate a life and conceal a heinous crime. This macabre tableau immediately ignited a protracted and painstaking investigation, culminating in a legal saga that not only exposed the dark currents beneath a seemingly ordinary relationship, but also pushed the boundaries of forensic science. Misty April Morse, born on the 10th of April, 1978, in Springfield, Ohio, was a vibrant young woman whose life was tragically cut short. Her family eventually relocated to Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. After her parents' divorce, Misty remained with her mother but cherished a close bond with her father. Known for her cheerful and outgoing nature, Misty enjoyed a wide circle of friends and had a deep love for the outdoors. More than anything, she relished swimming in the ocean, surfing, and simply spending time on the beach with her companions. After graduating high school, Misty held various jobs before enrolling in a local community college, seeking to discover her career path as she progressed. By the summer of 2000, the 22-year-old was waitressing at a local cafe, dedicating most of her free time to her social life. The last time Misty's mother saw her was on the evening of the 20th of July. Misty told her she was heading out, and their brief conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Misty answered, spoke a few quick words, then hung up and informed her mother she had to leave. The next day, when her mother returned home from work, Misty wasn't there. Initially, her mother wasn't concerned, accustomed to Misty's late shifts or occasional overnight stays with friends. However, when another day passed without a word, worry began to creep in. 2 days had passed, and there was no contact. What made the situation particularly unsettling was their shared car arrangement. They typically swapped it weekly, but Misty never came to pick it up. Repeated calls to Misty's phone went unanswered. This growing apprehension escalated into full-blown panic by the 24th of July, prompting her mother to decide it was time to contact the police. Before she could, a knock at the door revealed a police officer. The moment she saw their somber faces, she instinctively knew something was terribly wrong. They delivered the devastating news: Misty's body had been found. The day before police arrived at Misty's mother's home, on the 23rd of July, a retired judge in Merritt Island had stepped outside to mow his lawn. His property bordered the river, and as he glanced towards the water, he noticed something peculiar. His initial thought was the body of a large animal, but then an overwhelming, unmistakable smell of decay permeated the air. Moving closer, he realized with horror that it was not an animal, but a human body. He immediately alerted the authorities. Upon arrival, officers confirmed it was indeed a woman's body floating in the water. However, they immediately encountered a significant challenge. The body was already in an advanced state of decomposition, making recovery extremely difficult without further damage. To retrieve it carefully, they had to employ a specialized fabric, designed to allow water to drain while securely containing the remains. Once detectives successfully recovered the body, it became immediately apparent they were dealing with a murder. The victim was unclothed, and her wrists and ankles were bound tightly with rope. Large amounts of duct tape were also found on her body. Her legs had been secured to plastic shopping bags, which investigators suspected had been filled with rocks or other heavy objects, intended to keep her submerged. However, the bags had apparently torn open, and their contents had spilled out. In addition to the rope and tape, detectives observed something unusual. Several rubber cords, typically used to secure window protective screens, were also tied around her body. All these items were sent to the lab for analysis. While medical examiners began their grim work, they quickly faced a major obstacle: determining the exact cause of death was nearly impossible. There were no obvious stab wounds or gunshot injuries, and the level of decomposition obscured less apparent trauma. Ultimately, experts concluded that the most probable cause of death was either strangulation or drowning. The latter theory suggested she had been in the water for several days and might have still been alive when she was thrown in. With no obvious clues like DNA or fingerprints directly on the body to point to a suspect, investigators focused on identifying the victim. It was a painstaking process, but the following day, they finally achieved a match. Fingerprints confirmed the woman in the river was Misty Morse. By this time, forensic experts had already examined the ropes, plastic bags, and duct tape used to restrain her. But frustratingly, none of these items yielded direct, useful evidence like fingerprints. However, one detail stood out. A few short, dark hairs were stuck to the duct tape. It was immediately clear these hairs did not belong to Misty, and detectives recognized them as a potentially crucial lead. They were sent to the lab for further analysis. Once Misty's identity was confirmed, detectives spoke with her mother, who recounted seeing her daughter last on the evening of the 20th of July, 3 days before Misty's body was discovered. Her mother also shared a detail that piqued their interest. Just before leaving the house, Misty received a short phone call. It seems someone had arrived to pick her up and was calling to let her know they were outside. However, Misty never specified who she was meeting, making it significantly harder to track down a potential suspect. Hoping to find answers, detectives requested Misty's phone records. However, they encountered a major hurdle for the time period. Phone companies lacked the capability to provide details about incoming calls, not even the caller's number. The police could only confirm that Misty received 2 calls that night. The first lasted a few minutes, and then, shortly after, there was a second, much shorter call, the one her mother heard right before Misty departed. When detectives searched Misty's room, they found her purse with all her belongings, except for 2 items, her driver's license and her phone. The fact that she left her purse behind suggested she likely hadn't planned to be gone for long. This led investigators to a troubling conclusion. Misty's killer was likely someone she knew well, someone she trusted enough to leave with that night. Forensic experts also yielded some intriguing findings. While they hadn't recovered clear identifying evidence from the ropes or duct tape, they did notice something unusual. The type of rope used to bind Misty was commonly found on boats. Moreover, the knots were tied in a way that suggested the killer possessed some form of military or maritime training, knots typically taught in the Navy and Coast Guard. And then there was the duct tape. It wasn't just any kind, but a special type specifically designed for temporary repairs on boats. All of this strongly pointed in a specific direction. Misty's killer not only had access to a boat, but likely possessed a military background. With no other immediate solid leads, detectives shifted their focus to Misty's personal life, hoping to uncover any connections that might bring them closer to her killer. Misty's mother informed detectives that in the weeks leading up to her death, Misty had been casually seeing a man named Teddy, a relative of one of her co-workers. Although they had gone on a few dates, their relationship hadn't progressed seriously. However, when police delved into Teddy's background, they found an alarming criminal record, including arrests for assaults, theft, and other offenses. Detectives brought him in for questioning, and Teddy confirmed his casual relationship with Misty, vehemently denying any involvement in her harm. As the interrogation proceeded, detectives began to doubt his involvement. Teddy genuinely appeared distraught by Misty's death, and his demeanor suggested no attempt to conceal anything. Nevertheless, they left no stone unturned, requesting a DNA sample, a precautionary measure since they didn't yet have the killer's DNA. Teddy readily agreed and granted permission to search his apartment without a warrant. Despite a thorough search, nothing was found connecting him to the crime. Furthermore, investigators learned Teddy had never served in the military and didn't have access to a boat. Ultimately, they moved on, doubting his culpability. Misty's relatives then brought up another individual she had dated, a man named Bobby. Initially, he didn't seem a likely suspect. However, detectives learned something that caught their attention. After their date, Misty had told friends that Bobby wasn't her type and she wasn't interested in seeing him again. But Bobby seemed to disregard this message, persistently calling, trying to convince her to meet up. He was remarkably persistent, to the point where Misty confided to friends she felt he was stalking her. Detectives decided to pay Bobby a visit, and upon arriving at his house, they noticed something immediately. He had a boat on his property. Bobby agreed to answer their questions, claiming he wasn't overly bothered by Misty's unresponsiveness. He did admit, however, to calling her every day, right up until the 23rd of July, the day he learned of her death. For the most part, Bobby seemed genuinely upset about Misty's death. Then, something entirely unexpected happened. In the middle of the conversation, he suddenly pulled out Misty's driver's license from his pocket and handed it to the detectives. He explained he had been holding on to it since their first date, claiming Misty had no pockets that night and asked him to keep it, then simply forgot to retrieve it. Detectives found this story highly suspicious. Their date had been weeks ago. Was it truly plausible Misty never noticed her ID was missing? And if she had left it with him, why wouldn't she have asked for it back? With growing doubts, investigators requested permission to search Bobby's home, which he granted. However, a thorough search yielded nothing linking him to the murder. Another issue arose. Bobby had no military background, which didn't fit the killer's emerging profile. It seemed Bobby was another dead end. Just as detectives were about to leave Bobby's house, he surprised them yet again. He suddenly recalled something from his date with Misty that might be useful. Misty had mentioned an ex-boyfriend who had a reputation for being quite aggressive. Bobby didn't know his name but remembered one crucial detail. The guy had served in the Marines. This immediately caught the detectives' attention. They went straight to Misty's mother, who instantly had an answer: Brett Huck. Misty's mother explained that Misty and Brett had been together for quite some time but had broken up about a year before her death. She recalled Misty describing Brett as controlling and aggressive, always demanding to know her whereabouts, who she was with, and what she was doing. His behavior eventually became too much, leading Misty to end the relationship. After that, her mother had not heard anything about him. Detectives began digging into Brett Huck, and what they uncovered was highly significant. He lived in the same area where Misty's body had been found. He had also served in the Marines, precisely matching their profile. Furthermore, he worked as a charter boat captain, giving him easy access to boats and the specific type of specialized equipment found with Misty's body. With all this compelling information, detectives decided to bring Brett in for questioning. To avoid tipping him off, they approached him subtly, stating they were simply gathering as much information as possible about Misty's personal life due to a lack of strong leads. Brett agreed to talk. He admitted that he and Misty had continued seeing each other occasionally after their breakup but insisted their relationship was completely over, with no romantic involvement. However, as the conversation progressed, something felt off. Brett didn't seem remotely upset about Misty's death. If anything, he projected an air of cockiness, almost arrogance, a stark contrast to the reactions of other individuals questioned about Misty's murder. This demeanor alone was enough to heighten detectives' suspicions. Despite Brett's arrogant facade, detectives managed to extract some very interesting information. When asked about the last time he spoke to Misty, Brett named the exact night she disappeared: Wednesday, the 20th of July. This was the same night Misty had told her mom she was heading out to meet someone. Brett claimed he called her twice that evening but insisted they never actually saw each other. This immediately raised red flags for detectives. Based on Misty's mother's account, they were convinced that whoever made the last call was the person who picked her up. Misty's phone records showed no other incoming calls that evening. Yet, Brett stuck to his story. He claimed he had called Misty because he'd heard rumors that she was telling people she was pregnant with his child. At the time, he was dating someone else, and he asserted these rumors threatened his current relationship, prompting him to call Misty to make her stop spreading lies. Detectives, however, were not convinced. Firstly, medical examiners found no signs of pregnancy during Misty's autopsy. Secondly, none of her friends had ever heard her mention being pregnant. Brett's entire story simply didn't add up. Detectives asked Brett for permission to search his home, and like the previous individuals, he agreed. This time, however, they found more than they expected. The first thing that caught their attention was in the kitchen. Brett had multiple plastic bags from the same store as the ones that had been tied to Misty's legs. Initially, this didn't seem particularly damning, as many people shop at the same grocery store. But detectives decided to take a closer look. Forensic experts examined the manufacturing code stamped onto each bag during production. When compared with the codes on the bags found with Misty's body, they discovered something disturbing. All the bags were made at the same time, on the same production line, in the same factory. This meant there was a strong probability that the bags used in the crime had come directly from Brett's kitchen. And that was just the beginning. In his garage, detectives found the exact same type of rubber cord that had been wrapped around Misty's body. Just as with the bags, they checked the serial number and confirmed that both the cord in Brett's garage and the one found on Misty's body had been produced on the same machine from the same batch. Then they found a roll of specialized marine duct tape, the very same kind that had been used to bind Misty. Finally, they discovered rope identical to what was found on Misty's body, tied with the exact same military-style knots. At this point, detectives moved beyond mere suspicion. They had a substantial collection of compelling evidence. After concluding the search and meticulously analyzing all these items, detectives were almost certain that Brett was responsible for Misty's murder. They theorized that he might have genuinely believed the pregnancy rumors and panicked, deciding to eliminate the perceived problem before it could escalate and ruin his current relationship. What he likely didn't realize, however, was that Misty wasn't pregnant, and she probably had no knowledge of these rumors. With all the accumulated evidence, detectives presented their case to the district attorney, hoping to move forward with formal charges. However, things took a frustrating turn. After reviewing the case, the prosecutor initially declined to press charges. He explained that every single piece of evidence was circumstantial. There was no direct proof, no human DNA, no eyewitnesses, no confession, just a strong chain of coincidences. As convincing as it seemed to the detectives, the prosecutor warned them it wouldn't be enough for a conviction in court. Ultimately, he told detectives they needed to find something stronger. So, despite having a prime suspect and a mountain of circumstantial evidence, investigators found themselves back at square one, knowing who likely committed the crime, but unable to prove his guilt definitively. For 2 long years, the case remained at a frustrating standstill, a cold file gathering dust. Then, detectives revisited the evidence, uncovering a pivotal development. They learned that a recent murder case in California had been successfully resolved through DNA analysis of dog hair, precisely the kind of breakthrough they desperately needed. Without delay, they contacted the same specialized lab that conducted the analysis in California, requesting an examination of their own crucial evidence. Forensic experts successfully extracted a DNA profile from the animal hairs found on the duct tape from Misty's body. Subsequently, detectives collected a sample from Brett's dog, a black German Shepherd Rottweiler mix. When the results returned, they revealed a perfect match. The hairs originated from the very same canine. Adding a layer of poignant irony, it was revealed that Misty herself had gifted Brett this dog when they were still dating. Armed with this irrefutable genetic link, detectives now possessed the tangible proof necessary to finally bring Brett to justice. They revisited the prosecutor, who, convinced by the definitive canine DNA match, agreed to proceed with the case to trial. On the 23rd of October, 2002, Brett Huck was arrested, and his trial commenced a few months later. Throughout the proceedings, Brett remained unyielding in his claims of innocence, suggesting one of Misty's other ex-boyfriends must have been the real killer. However, faced with a formidable array of compelling evidence, the prosecution had little difficulty convincing the jury of his guilt. Ultimately, Brett Huck was convicted of kidnapping and murder, receiving 2 consecutive life sentences. During the trial, prosecutors theorized that Brett, gripped by panic after genuinely believing the pregnancy rumors, had decided to eliminate Misty before she could ruin his current relationship. While the precise details of how he lured her that night or how events escalated remain unconfirmed, detectives postulated Brett brought Misty to his home, restrained her, loaded her into his boat, and then transported her out onto the water, leaving her to drown. After his conviction, Brett pursued an appeal, but the court denied his request. To this day, he remains incarcerated, steadfastly maintaining his innocence. Following the sentencing, Misty's father expressed a powerful and enduring sentiment to reporters. He hoped Brett would endure 1,000 years in that prison cell, waking up every single day remembering the pain he caused to their family. The Misty Morse case stands as a profound testament to the unwavering persistence of law enforcement and the evolving power of forensic science, ultimately bringing a measure of closure, however painful, to the victims of such horrific crimes.